And you don't seem to understand. A shame you seemed an honest man.
Yo, I'm Hannah. If you're new here, I'm so glad you could make it to the sleepover tonight because I was just about to start crafting. I saw this picture on Pinterest the other day and I was like, damn, I'm gonna have to copy that because that would just look so cute in the van with my Halloween decorations I've already got up right now. I got a vintage book from the thrift store with all the fun yellowing pages, and I've got my fuzzy socks on. You should too if you haven't already. My festive blanket to keep us warm on this dark and stormy night, as you can see here. But don't worry, we've got our fireplace keeping us warm and extra cozy this evening. I thought it could be kind of fun to have just a spooky themed fireside chat while I'm crafting today. So stick around if you want to hear me talk about some of my horror faves, my Halloween faves, while I create this little banner. So let's talk about the first horror movies I ever watched. I was always pretty into horror, and I think that's just a weird kid thing. I think all weird kids are naturally drawn to horror because it's weird and it's comforting to kids that are weird. But no, I mean, I wasn't allowed to watch horror movies when I was very young, but I was always very interested in it. And it probably was due to the fact I wasn't allowed to watch it. But at a very young age, my dad got the okay for me to watch Christine with him. My dad was really into Stephen King. It was my family that got me into Stephen King. My dad read a lot of Stephen King, and so did my older cousin. But yeah, my dad loved Christine. And my family was like, it's not even scary, you know? Like, it's a car. So I watched that when I lived in the trailer, so I had to be like less than 8 years old because we moved into the house when I was in 3rd grade. That movie is wild. Like, I mean, it is kind of scary. Like, this car is sentient and is like crushing people, but dude's like fucking his car. It's like the original Titan. My Strange Addiction, you know? That vibe. He's like obsessed with this car. This car's like possessed. That car is revving his engines. My cousin that lived in West Virginia, he was like my best friend through childhood, but we didn't get to see each other very often. So it was always a treat when we got to meet up either in West Virginia or he would come to Missouri for the holidays. But we watched Eight-Legged Freaks like we always did. That was like our movie. If you haven't seen Eight-Legged Freaks, that's not really a horror movie. It's more like a sci-fi channel type movie. It's very corny, very cheesy. It made me obsessed with the idea of toxic waste. Because basically, like, toxic waste gets poured on this abandoned lab, and the lab's, like, overrun with spiders. These spiders turn gigantic and then, like, take over a town. So, anyways, yeah, we would always watch that movie together. Oh, this was one of my very early horror movies. I was not supposed to watch this one. I knew what Chucky was, and I knew I wasn't supposed to watch it because my uncle really liked the Chucky movies, and my mom was like, those are inappropriate, and those are too scary and gross, like, you can't watch those. Because, yeah, Chucky is obscene. Like, a kid should not be hearing the shit that Chucky says, you know? He's running around with a knife like, I'm gonna fuck your brains out, bitch. Like, stuff like that. Like,
Honey, plastic is no substitute for a nice hunk of wood.
Any guy would need a hunk of plastic, probably battery operated, to get a reaction out of you in bed.
no, I should not have watched that movie. But my babysitter, she was watching that movie in the living room. I was upstairs, supposed to be sleeping. But I was sitting my ass at the top of the stairs watching The Bride of Chucky. And that was like during a time I was very afraid of dolls too, but I don't know, like Chucky's just kind of ridiculous. I was not scared of it. When I was like in 4th grade probably, that's when I was like allowed to watch scary movies, as long as they were PG-13. And then I was allowed to watch rated R scary movies only if they were rated R for boobs. Because, I don't know, that was just my family's rule. They're like, there's nothing scary about boobs, you know, you have boobs, like, it's just a pair of boobs. You know? So my family, I remember I thought it was so cool. They bought me one of those horror movie collection things from like the $5 bin. I don't remember any of those movies in there except for Bloody Mary. There was like a cheap version of Bloody Mary on that disc. And I showed all my friends that DVD. Like every time I had a sleepover, I would make my friends watch that DVD with me. And we'd always watch the Bloody Mary one, yeah. And then we would like play the game, you know? Try to scare the shit out of each other. It's like, oh, I saw her. I swear to fucking God, like Mary was in there, dude. Mary's actually not that bad. Mary's kind of cool. Me and my best friend Kaylee, we would always get our parents to take us to a red box, and we would just pick out a horror movie in there that kind of sounded cool. So we watched like a lot of budget movies back in the day. Like those are some of my early horror experiences. And it's like, where did that culture go? Where you would just go to a red box or a Blockbuster or a movie gallery, you know, like those existed when I was younger. And you would just like take a chance on something. You're like, this one looks dope, like the fucking description is fire, like that is gonna scare the shit out of us tonight, bro. And then you would pick up the DVD and you would go home and watch it. Where is the impulsiveness to watching a movie these days? Like, it takes forever to make a decision, and half the fucking time you're just gonna end up rewatching something you've already seen 100 times. Long are the days where you would just go to the movie store and take a chance. Ah, good times. Early favorites of mine were like the Saw movies. I would always get so excited when Saw movies would come out. I remember seeing Scream 4 in theater when that came out. That was cool, and I really liked Scream 4. I don't think a lot of people did, but I did. That was like my intro to Scream. So then I watched the Scream movies. I loved those. I'm not really into slashers. That's an unpopular opinion, but I just don't get into them really. I like something with like a story, like a cool, complex story. And like, yeah, I know, like the slasher people, they have lore. Every now and then I'll get down with slasher, but yeah, it's not my first choice for the horror genre. So like, yeah, those were my favorites when I was younger. My favorites now, like, I mean, I have a lot of favorites, but my top horror favorites would have to be The Shining. And I know Stephen King hates the movie adaptation. And to be honest, the movie adaptation is very different from the book.
Here's Johnny!
But it's a good movie. You know, if you look at the movie as its own entity apart from the book, it's a great movie. I am a huge found footage girl. So a lot of my favorite horror movies fall into that category, including Blair Witch. And I know, you know, the people who hate it really fucking hate that movie for some reason. But, you know, it's a cult classic for a reason. There's a lot of people who love it, including me. And, you know, I always hear, oh, well, people love it so much because they were there when it came out. Like, it's one of those movies, like, you had to be there for. Obviously, the main appeal with Blair Witch when it came out was that it was doing something that hadn't been done before. And a lot of people thought it was real when it came out. Found footage was a very new genre at the time, and it just kind of took the world by storm for a second. So I was neck deep in my Slenderman phase when I finally watched Blair Witch, and there's a lot of similarities there because Slenderman paved the way for an entirely new type of horror genre. And Slenderman is such a hidden figure in the horror genre because I feel like that's something not a lot of people know, but you would not have things like The Back Room, Local 58, Petscop. Like, you wouldn't have any of those things without Slenderman existing first. And it's so funny because, like, every time I tell people I was a Slenderman kid, I think they automatically assume like I'm, you know, on DeviantArt making these little weird cartoons and I'm making fan fiction on Tumblr. No. Those were not my people. That was not my crowd. I was a Slenderman kid. It was a weird internet phenomenon. I don't know, like, there's a docuseries that came out this year that explains it so well, and I loved every second of that docuseries because every time I try to explain it to someone, I have no idea how to explain it. And that documentary, like, I can just point to that documentary and be like, that's what I'm talking about. You know, I'm going to try my best here. Slender Man became a thing after a Photoshop contest happened on Something Awful forums back in the day. Those photos, I'm sure everyone's seen them, they, you know, went viral. Something weird was happening online. People just took those images, latched onto them, and ran with it, dude. Like, so much content was made from those images. And it was cool because he was like a blank slate. He had no lore. He was a Photoshop contest. Like, he didn't start off as a creepypasta. All the lore that Slenderman has is from its fan base, which is so cool. Basically what happened was ARGs were born from the Slenderman concept. There were some people who had done it prior, but it did not become popularized. It wasn't like a coined thing until Slenderman. If you don't know what ARGs are, it stands for Alternate Reality Game, and it's basically a found footage series, oftentimes on YouTube. You can pretty much make an ARG out of anything, but it's most commonly on YouTube, and yeah, it acts as like a found footage film essentially, but like a video series. And you know, there's some sort of story going along that presents itself as, you know, happening in real life. And when Slenderman became popular, Marble Hornets happened. Marble Hornets was a YouTube channel that created a found footage video series, ARG, about a group of friends being stalked by Slenderman. And it took the internet by storm. It created this whole like niche category on YouTube that's like, it wasn't popular, like it wasn't mainstream, but it was incredibly popular to those who were into it. So tons of other YouTube channels like that started happening, and that's how you ended up getting these other ARG series. Slenderman ARGs did it first. They were the predecessor to it all. So strange to think about, but it was real. There was like a whole community around it. People built that lore. There were blogs for it. There was people making Wattpad books. I was making a Wattpad book. I was one of the people writing a story like it was a diary happening in real time. I was essentially a blogger, but I was writing it as a fiction book on Wattpad. So yeah, I watched Blair Witch when I was obsessed with Slenderman and that whole weird movement. So it connected with me very hard because, like I said, there's a lot of similarities between those two things. Another found footage film I really love is As Above, So Below, which I think is also slept on. Found footage movies in general just tend to be slept on because there's still a lot of people who don't like that genre. It's essentially a found footage film about the concept of Dante's Inferno, the 9 Circles of Hell. It takes place in the Paris catacombs. Just a really cool movie. I love mindfuck horror movies, like movies that you have to watch twice, where you're like, what the hell did I just watch? What is going on? You're watching like ending explained YouTube videos after. I love that shit. I eat it up. Anything Jordan Peele's made, especially Us, I love that one. I love Shutter Island. I think I have enough. I think I might have enough here. So we are gonna start stringing these along. I show this movie to everybody, even if they don't like horror movies, because it's not even a true horror movie. Disturbia. I fucking love Disturbia. Shia LaBeouf, fuck him, but he killed it in Disturbia. Let's talk about books. As I've mentioned earlier, I am a Stephen King fanatic. I pretty much am always reading a Stephen King book, and when I'm not reading a Stephen King book, I'm reading his son's books, Joe Hill. Lock and Key is my favorite graphic novel series ever. It's Joe Hill's, and it's a really cool horror series. There's the Netflix adaptation, which is a good show. It's kind of magical. It's like horror magic, horror fantasy. Some of my favorite Stephen King books are The Shining, obviously, Dr. Sleep. I didn't like the movie adaptation of Dr. Sleep. Finishing Salem's Lot now, and I really like Salem's Lot. But the predecessor to Salem's Lot, he has like a short story collection, Night Shift. If you don't want to read a hefty-ass Stephen King book, I'd recommend reading Night Shift. It's full of a bunch of short stories. Some are longer than others. And it's really good. It was like one of the first things that he did. I loved House of Leaves. It's not an easy read. You know, there's some parts that are really slow. There would be times where I'm like, am I just illiterate? Like, can I not fucking read? Like, what is this? And I have to go look it up, only for the internet to tell me, hey, don't worry, you're not stupid. It's meant to be some schizophrenic gibberish. Like, it's not supposed to make any sense here. I'm like, oh. Great. It was frustrating, you know? There was a lot of parts where I just, you know, threw it on the floor and was like, fuck it, I'm not reading this anymore today. Overall, it's a masterpiece. It's very reminiscent of The Blair Witch. It's one of those books that it came out and people thought it was real. You know? It describes itself as being like an early internet phenomenon. It started off as just like random pages that were passed around in this cult following that eventually got bound into some loosely made manuscript, somehow passed off to a publisher, and it became the finished version you're reading. Basic premises is kind of like Fibonacci's golden ratio. Think the Tool album, you know? It's the Tool album, but it's also that Poe album. Literally, the entire book was inspired by Angry Johnny by Poe, and she ended up creating an entire album based on House of Leaves after the book came out. The book is kind of, Fibonacci's golden ratio mixed with liminal space before that was popularized. The idea of kind of the backrooms before the backrooms ever existed. But also kind of like Haunting of Hill House, the book version. There's kind of a mental health thing going on as well. It's very up to the reader's interpretation on what you think is going on in the book. I am a big H.P. Lovecraft fan ever since I was introduced to him back in high school, and I never looked back. I latched onto that shit. So of course I love all the hits, the Cthulhu Mythos, Dunwich Horror, and I just recently reread Shadow over Innsmouth because I'm in Lovecraft country, baby. I'm just having such a blast reading horror that takes place in New England. It just adds this extra exciting layer of immersion to the whole experience. Total when in Rome mentality, because I am in the home to so many horror greats right now. Edgar Allan Poe, H.P. Lovecraft, and Stephen King. And it's no wonder they write about this place. I mean, maybe it's because we're transitioning into fall, leaves are changing, it's getting colder, Halloween's around the corner. But there definitely is this eldritch vibe to the entire area. And it makes sense, there's a lot of dark history out here. But yeah, I just am really into horror that centers itself around this ancient, unfathomable bad. You know, something that's been around since the dawn of time or predates mankind, and it stacks from generation to generation, trickles down. That's another reason why I like King so much, and he definitely was inspired by Lovecraft's work. But the fear of the unknown is one of the strongest kickers for me personally, because I am somewhat of a control freak. I need to have all the answers. So not knowing, especially if I'm unable to know, like it's incomprehensible because I'm just a human being, that creates such an uneasy feeling inside me, and it makes me obsessed. After I finish a project like that, I'll just be frantically Googling shit, reading theories, I'm scrolling down Reddit, trying to wrap my brain around what I just consumed. It leaves me thinking about it long after I've finished it, and I think that's probably what every horror creator is looking for. Something that sticks with you and unsettles you. Alright, she turned out pretty damn cute. I did have my doubts while I was crafting, but hey, always trust the process because I am so happy with this. I think it turned out so cute. I'm so glad we sat down and crafted tonight, guys. And don't come for me about my movie taste, okay? I could never and will never be a letterboxed hoe. I could never claim my movie taste is good. I just like what I like. And hey, for books, I pretty much just read one guy. So maybe it's not for you, and that's okay. I just love being able to sit down and gush about the things I love, and horror is such a big part of my life, so I had a lot of fun with our fireside horror chit-chat tonight. Hope you had a good time at the sleepover. And on that note, I will be dipping hands in hot water and freezing bras tonight. So, good night. Don't be the first to fall asleep.
All the fears you hold so dear.